After I played and reviewed through the Hotline Miami games, it gave me an obsession with twin-stick shooters. And because of that, I got to experience games like Enter the Gungeon, God's Trigger, Ruiner, Hyperlight Drifter, and so on. I almost even tried developing a prototype of my own, and I think I might get back onto it one day. But anyway, that's when I also got into another game by the name of Ape Out, the Devolver Digital game developed by Gabe Kuzio, where you get this, play as a monkey. While I was off YouTube, I had the chance to play it and I enjoyed it a lot, but that was about a year ago before I finally picked it up again. So this video isn't just looking back at whether I really did enjoy it as much as I did back then, but also how it holds up now on its own. The basic controls are pretty much like most twin-stick shooters. The only other one worth mentioning is the grab button, in which you just grab and throw everything around you that you can get your hands on. Really makes you feel like a monkey. It's the only way to defend yourself, but you can use grabbing in effective ways, like using enemies as human meat shields or even cannon fodder. As simple as it seems, there's nothing really wrong with them, which I think does the job fine for this game. The game feels more like an addicting arcade that anyone can enjoy, so it shouldn't need too many mechanics to memorize. I will say that it does feel slow trying to move around with a controller, but it's just a nitpick in a haystack. Anyway, that about covers it for the controls. The gameplay loop is pretty simple as well. You have 4 stages, or albums, that all play off in the same way. Starting from escaping the ape cell to roaming a maze-like level, finding a way out to the next one. You can also play these levels however you want, whether it be trying to avoid attacking any enemies and dodging gunfire, or monkey mode. Either way, you have to make it out to each level with a maximum of 3 hits or you start over. The game doesn't really judge your performance at the end of each level or stage, but it does record your time beaten as well as the deaths. Moving on, what I love about this game is the fact that everything in the level is procedural generated, from the map layout to the enemy placement, and even the music, but we'll get to that later. This means even with only 4 albums, there's still a good amount of replay value and it never feels the same no matter how many times you play it. Speaking of which, replaying the game also offers a harder difficulty mode that's pretty much the same way except that there's a lot more enemies around the level than before. This means that you have to react very quickly to get rid of them if you choose to do so. Along with that, you also have an arcade mode that tallies your kills and combos, but this time it challenges you to beat each level in a strict time limit. The other difference is that you have to grind through each album with only 1 life, so it adds even more challenge. Just like Hotline Miami, the amount of content that this game provides as a base level is pretty amazing. While each album isn't that long to beat on the normal difficulty by, say, 30 minutes, there is still plenty to do in the game, and even the levels themselves can have varying levels of difficulty every time. As for the enemies in the game, there's a decent variety of them. While they have very similar strategies in terms of how to take them down, they do have some different weapons that can be useful in different scenarios. For example, the heavy is not only useful as a meat shield, but also doubles as a way to take down multiple enemies at the same time. The machine gunner is also useful for wiping down enemies, but is useful for only 1 enemy at a time. The pyro also cleans out a large horde when you're in a tight spot but need to get past them. And the sniper can be useful if you need to take out an enemy from a far distance. Despite it being easy to grab any of them, you can still take down enemies in interesting ways just by grabbing them. You can also use the environment to your advantage. One example is the metal door, which is useful for deflecting gunfire. Flammable barrels can also be used to scare enemies if there's a large enough crowd in the way, but you're not gonna last too long if you keep burning yourself. In the level Rough Seas, the lights go out every couple of seconds to give you a chance to run past them while they're lost in the dark, or you can attack them from behind. In Burnout, you can lure enemies near deployed bombs so that they can get wiped by the explosion. While a lot of these examples are cool, I was also expecting to throw around objects like desks or barrels, but they're just more for setting up the scene. It's not a deal breaker, but I mean, if you're playing a monkey simulator, you gotta throw some things. With only a few nitpicks barely worth mentioning, it still has some great gameplay, and the base game alone offers a lot of replay value. This section is probably going to be really short since there's no real focus on the narrative. Sure, it doesn't even need a section in the video, but I still wanted to mention it, even if I can't really critique it. All you really need to know is that the ape is captured in a cell and tries to escape to each stage once freed. And each album plays this same story differently. The first album, Subject 4, is probably about the ape escaping an animal testing lab. High Rise takes place in a skyscraper construction where the ape has to scale down an entire building. Fugue is where it's set in a jungle. And Adrift is the final level in which the ape is being shipped off. Yep, that's all you need to know about the plot. Alright, let's move on to the real parts of the video. What I love about Ape Out's art style is that it gives up a very 50s look, from the characters to the environments and even the typography. Everything in the game is simplified to these cartoony, minimalist silhouettes that just look appealing. There have been a few games that play around with vintage art styles like Cuphead, but this game makes you feel like you're playing inside those minimalist posters. The artist behind it is Bennett Foddy. Yes, that guy.
Oh, brother!
But he's also a professor at the New York University Game Center that Kazuo worked with before the game was in development. While Foddy was responsible for creating the final look, it was Kazuo's idea that came from his interests in artists like Saul Bass, Ollie Moss, and other similar artists of the time. Because of that, it fits with the music and sound design very well. The album art is also very interesting. It's made as if they look like jazz albums, with those simple but iconic looking designs. That gives you a basic idea of what each album is going to be about before playing them. The cover art also looks like a vintage movie poster, and it makes it look as if the ape is just staring at you from behind the bars. But I mean, it does make a good cover. For one, the art style doesn't add any amount of detail to show you how the ape feels being held captive in this prison cell. The minimalism lets you kind of imagine its frustration, holding in the havoc that'll be released once it escapes, so it kind of looks intimidating. It's also not completely plain with the grainy details that you can see, so it drags your attention even more. Now, there's nothing really problematic that I have against it, so I'll leave it at that. Foddy and Kazuo's work helps make this game have a more memorable image thanks to the vintage but creative style, which makes it stick out a lot more from other games. Most games have a soundtrack composed by musicians who use real or virtual instruments, and the tracks are usually just short clips that are programmed to loop seamlessly. As for sound effects, these are clips that only play according to any player action or reacting to what the player is doing in the environment. What's different about Ape Out's sound design is that it doesn't feel like anything you hear is repetitive. Like how the levels are procedural generated, so too is the music. Well, kind of. The sound designer Matt Bach, who worked in the studio responsible for games like Dance Central and Rock Band, programmed a virtual drummer to improvise the background music of each level. What this means is that every time you replay a level, the beat never sounds the same most of the time. The drummer also hits a different symbol to mark a kill, depending on where the enemy was, and changes the intensity of the drumming as you grind more kills quickly, or if you take your time. Now you might think that having a drum machine do the music would sound very boring because it plays too precise. And most of the time I do agree. But with how Bach programmed this drummer is done in such a way that it almost feels as if a real drummer was behind it, thanks to a machine learning program called Variational Autoencoder Neural Network. Basically, from what I can tell, it's the equivalent of those programs that generate selfies of fake human faces based on a huge number of photos that it collects. In that same analogy, the program is used to collect a large number of drum samples and then creates a realistic solo that feels improvised. On top of that, the soundtrack in each album, and even for each level to an extent, uses a different drum kit with unique percussion sounds. For example, the stealth sections where you sneak around in the dark heavily uses cymbals to give that stealthy vibe. In the levels of Adrift where you're running around the ship, the drum kit really sounds like a hollow barrel. And finally, the second half of the Side A in High Rise doesn't really have much of a drum kit, just hand claps, which is kind of cool. There's very little criticism I have for it to improve, because it seems like Kazuo really did his best to make everything lock with not just the gameplay, but also have the art style and music also supported as more than just background music. Ape Out kind of feels small with what it offers, but still makes up for it with adding features that immensely builds up on the replay value. The gameplay, while very simplistic, still feels enjoyable and addicting every time. The art style still stands out from the crowd with its brilliant homage to iconic 50s movie posters, and the sound design is designed so well that it feels natural despite it being a drum machine. All of it plays a part in what makes this game not just great but also worth playing through every time. It's something that anyone can just play to pass off some time but still get some fun out of it, and I've done that recently even before making this video. The best thing about it is that most of this game revolves around the use of procedural generation, which changes up the gameplay experience. I'm glad that Kazuo's hard work paid off with making this as his second major project, and I can't wait for him to do more games like this. Thanks for sticking around through the video and supporting the channel even while I was gone. Feels good to finally make a review after all these months. Now, of course, this wasn't a video that I've always wanted to do, but it is a step in the direction of where I want to go again. Hopefully I can continue to make better videos as time goes on, but I hope you guys liked what I have right now. If you did, feel free to give it a like and subscribe for more content coming soon. We'll be uploading a bit more frequently, but I'll keep you guys posted as I make more channel updates probably. Aside from that, I can't really say what's coming up next. I am going to start recording on a new video really soon, so once I have another channel update that's ready with some information, I'll let you guys know. Thanks again for the support, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright, take care.